So it seems like a few of my subscribers were a bit confused about what I was trying to say in my last video, talking about why console gaming will never become irrelevant. I feel like a few of you may have thought that I was trying to defend console gaming and saying that console gaming is cheaper or better than PC. No, I think console gaming is still a terrible value. Even if you have a $300 next-gen console in the form of the Xbox Series S, console gaming is still a ripoff. That is not a good value. Even $300, you think, oh, it's $300. It's so cheap. But there's so many hidden costs with consoles that it actually costs you more to be a console gamer than a PC gamer. And if you're a console gamer, hate to break it to you, but you're getting scammed. Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo are ripping you off. And most of you don't even realize it. And I think a lot of it is people have grown up with consoles and have played on consoles for decades that they just rather stick with what they know. And they'd rather stay away from PC because they don't know a whole lot about it. I can guarantee you the average console gamer, the average person walking down the street, couldn't tell you the difference between a GPU and a CPU. And this isn't me trying to insinuate that console gamers are stupid. It's just that the average person doesn't even know the most basic things about technology. And I'll tell you one thing, I don't know basic things about cars that I probably should know about, so we all have our weaknesses. That has nothing to do with intelligence. We just know a lot more about some things than other things. That's perfectly fine and perfectly normal, but I think that's one of the big things that keeps console gaming relevant. It's that people are more comfortable with what they've been exposed to for their entire life, and to go into something like PC gaming that is completely new and different and makes you have to know certain things that you didn't know before, and you really have to learn a lot to get into PC gaming. You really do. I mean, I've been a PC gamer for a little over 2 years now, and there are things that I'm still learning about. For example, I didn't even know until a week ago that my motherboard had a PCI Express port that I can use to plug in an SSD. I didn't even know that. But for the average console gamer that doesn't know a whole lot about tech, talking about PCI Express ports and motherboards, it probably sounds like fucking Swahili to these people. And they don't know what any of it means. So they're sticking with their consoles because it's what they're comfortable with. They don't want to have to spend even a little time to learn new things. So they keep playing on consoles because they know very little about PC gaming and what it has to offer. And because of how little they know, they assume, oh, PC gaming, it's so expensive, it's for rich people, it's just something I can't afford to do even if I wanted to. I just can't afford to spend $1,000 or more to buy a gaming PC, but a $500 console, $400, or especially the $299 Xbox Series S, that's more affordable for me. You know, that's what these console gamers are thinking, except they don't realize that with consoles comes a myriad of hidden costs that you do not have on PC. The biggest example of this is the paid online that you have on consoles that simply does not exist on PC. There is no such thing as a monthly or annual subscription on PC that you have to pay in order to play your games online. It's completely free on Steam, Epic, or any other launcher you can think of on PC. There is no such thing as paid online for PC, but it exists on every single console. Nintendo consoles, PlayStation, and Xbox. One thing they all have in common is that they require you to pay a subscription in order to play games online. So if you don't pay the subscription, you can't play online. Simple as that. So if you think about the PlayStation 5, you can pay either $499 or $399. So $400 or $500 depending on which version of the console you get. Okay, on the surface level, it sounds a lot cheaper than spending $1,000 to get a gaming PC. Or at least one that would match the power of the next-gen consoles. But what people don't seem to realize is that based on the online multiplayer fee alone, these consoles are so much more expensive than what is indicated on the initial price tag. So initial price tag of $499 or $399, yeah, you're going to be paying way more than that just to use basic features of your console. And I would say in the year 2020, being able to play online with your friends and watching Netflix, they're pretty basic features that shouldn't have to cost $60 a year to access. So let's say for argument's sake that you get a PS5 and you bought it for $499 and you're going to use it for 5 years. In 5 years, you will spend a minimum of $800 to use the most basic features of the console, because you're talking $60 a year for PlayStation Plus, 60 times 5 is $300. Or how about the $300 Xbox Series S? It seems so much cheaper than the PS5, right? And definitely much cheaper than a gaming PC, except now Xbox Live Gold costs $100 a year because Microsoft recently dropped the option of paying $60 for an annual subscription. Now you have to buy a 3-month subscription for $25. 25 times 4 is 100. So Xbox Live Gold now costs $100 a year. So even if you get the cheapest console on the market and have it for 5 years, what's 100 times 5? That's 500. So you'll be spending the exact same money over a 5-year period for the Xbox Series S as you will for the PS5, which is $800. And that's not even scratching the surface, because the nature of a console is that the ecosystem is controlled by the console manufacturer. It's not an open platform that anyone can decide to make games for. No, it has to be approved and regulated by Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. Nobody else can just decide to create their own operating system or game store on the PlayStation or Xbox. It's just that can't happen on consoles. So what that means essentially is that Sony has a monopoly over the PlayStation. And that sounds like a stupid thing to say because that sounds like a very obvious thing. But on PC, there is no such thing. No one company controls the entire PC market. And you could argue that no one company controls the console market either. But let's say you buy one console, right? You buy the PlayStation 5. Sony controls everything that you're able to do, all the games you're able to buy. That's all controlled by Sony. But you see, on PC, you have Steam, which is made by Valve. You have Epic Games, GOG, which is owned by CD Projekt, and you have so many other launchers on PC that directly compete with each other, which results in cheaper games for the consumer. Steam and Epic are always offering free games, no strings attached, and that's another thing. The PlayStation Plus, if all those free games you have on PlayStation Plus, if you stop paying a subscription, you no longer have access to those games. So free games you get on Steam and Epic, you can keep them forever. So I know a lot of console gamers are going to try to say, oh, but what about the free games? What about those? Now, it doesn't mean shit because the free games you get on PC are actually free. But never mind that. Especially with the offering of disc-free consoles like the Xbox Series S and the disc-free PlayStation 5, games are going to be a lot more expensive on console than PC. Because on PC, you do have that competition in the games marketplace, but if you have a PlayStation, Sony controls the entire game market. At least back when you had a physical market, you can buy games used and you'd have that secondhand game market at GameStop and all these other stores. But now it seems almost inevitable that the physical market is going to completely collapse within the next 2 or 3 years. So you won't even have that anymore. Even if you have the console with the disc on it, if half the install base or more has the disc-free version of the console, then a lot of developers are going to just decide to put their games digital only because physical doesn't make any sense because they won't get a lot of sales off of physical if less people have the ability to even use physical. And that's exactly what the publishers and what Sony wants. They want less competition in the games market because that gives them a monopoly. And for the actual publishers, used games have been a nuisance to them for years, and they'd be glad to see it gone. But the thing is with consoles, right? Digital gaming is such a convenience, you think it's so much better than physical, but the thing is, the physical market was the only thing console gamers had to prevent a monopoly in the games market from occurring. Because, yeah, okay, you have competition from Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, but if you buy that one box, if you buy the Xbox, if you buy the PlayStation, Sony and Microsoft control all that. There's no such thing as Steam on PS5 or Xbox Series X. And not just that, but as of now, these new releases on next gen are going to cost $70 instead of $60, while they remain $60 on PC. Overall, games are just so much more expensive on console than PC that you will save a lot more money getting a PC in the long run, even if the upfront costs are higher. The Switch is probably the best example of this because you have the Switch tax where making a game on a cartridge is a lot more expensive than using the discs that the PS4 and Xbox One have. That, yeah, it costs a lot more to buy the same game on Switch as it would buying the same game on PS4 or Xbox One. Even if they're all priced at $60, you notice on the Switch the prices don't come down quite as much as it does on the other console. Even digitally, Nintendo seems pretty firm with their prices, and they can do that because they control the eShop on the Switch. They can do anti-consumer shit like having Mario 3D All-Stars a limited availability, even on digital. They'll pull it from the store, and they're also charging $60, which is way overpriced for 3 remastered games. Not even a full-fledged remake. They're little touch-ups. Nothing special. Nothing that your Dolphin emulator running at max settings on PC can't match. And that's the other thing. PC has emulation. You can't really do that on consoles. That saves you a lot of money because of all the games you could play on PC, essentially for free. Even if it may not be morally right for some people that you're essentially pirating games, it's still something that's so much easier on PC. And not for nothing, but if companies like Nintendo are overcharging for their games, can you blame people for pirating? But anyway, the point is games are a lot cheaper on PC and a lot more expensive on console. And that's because of how restrictive the consoles are compared to how open and free the PC market is. So you just have so many more options and so much more competition that games will be knocked off in price. The same cannot be said for consoles. And just think of other ways consoles restrict you. in the types of controllers that you can use. You can't use the PS4 controller on PS5 games. You can't use the DualSense controller on the Series X or an Xbox 360 controller on the Series X. But you can use every single one of those controllers. You can use the Series X controller, Xbox One controller, DualShock 4, DualSense, and Xbox 360 controller on PC with full controller support, and you won't run into any problem. Compare that on the console, where if your controller breaks, you're probably going to have to buy a new controller because you can't use any of your other ones. So never mind mod support, full backwards compatibility, emulation, all these other amazing things you have on PC that make it objectively better than consoles. More than all that, PC gaming is just better because it's not a scam like the consoles are. Console gaming is a huge scam. There's no reason why you should have to pay for online. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to use controllers that you paid for. And there's no reason why you should be paying $70 for games. So if you really care so much about saving money, you should avoid a console like the fucking plague. You need to get a gaming PC because you're gonna actually save a lot more money than you will buying a new console. And I'm just sick of hearing that PC gaming is so expensive, because it's really not. In the long term, you're gonna actually save more money switching to PC than you will buying the new consoles. And that's just something that people need to realize. Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, their sole purpose is to milk as much money out of your wallet as they possibly can. And it seems to be working. It's been working so great for all these years because the average consumer doesn't know any better. So these consoles continue to sell like crazy. But I think people need to realize that PC gaming really isn't that much more expensive than console gaming, even if we're only talking about upfront costs. Because the console itself does not cost $300 or $400, $500. You're going to be spending a lot more money on that just to have the most basic gaming experience. We already talked about the online multiplayer. We already talked about controllers and stuff like that. With the Nintendo Switch, you need to buy a separate controller. You cannot play games with just the Joy-Cons. If you're trying to play real games like Splatoon, you can't use the Joy-Cons. The Joy-Con controls are awful. So you're gonna have a Switch Pro controller. Most people I know with the Switch, they have the Switch Pro controller, and that's for a reason. So that's another $60 on top of the $300 Switch. And how about storage? We didn't even talk about storage. That's another huge scam. You can't buy a Switch without also buying a micro SD card, because the 32 gigabytes that comes with the Switch, there's some games that are literally unplayable without external storage, even if it's the only game you have. 32 gigabytes is just not enough. So you can buy a 256 gigabyte card for like $40, which isn't too bad, but still, that's another hidden cost of a console. And it's going to be even worse with these next-gen consoles, the PS5 and Series X, especially the Series S that we talked about, the $300 console. Yeah, it only has 500 gigabytes of storage. That's not even close to being enough in 2020. In 2013, the PS4 only had 500 gigabytes, and you cannot get by with 500 gigabytes of storage. You definitely aren't going to get away with that in 2020, as games are getting even bigger in size, so you're gonna have to get more storage. You just have to. There's no way around it. And with the Series S, Seagate is selling these proprietary SSD drives that cost $200 for 1 terabyte SSD. So between the price of the console itself, the external storage, and the year of Xbox Live Gold that we talked about, your $300 console turns into a $600 console just in 1 year. Then add that $100 every year. Oh my god. You'll be spending a lot for that cheap console that you think is cheap but actually isn't. And the PlayStation 5 is actually going to be even worse because they have their proprietary SSD that runs at an insanely fast speed, which is great, but also prevents you from buying an external SSD that might be a little slower, because all PlayStation 5 games require developers to take advantage of those fast speeds. So you would have serious compatibility problems. It wouldn't even work. For you to use an external SSD, you would have to buy a proprietary SSD that Sony would offer if they decide to offer it. And you know that's going to be way overpriced. Who knows how much it would cost just for 1 terabyte? I don't even want to know. Because the fastest SSD on the market right now for 1 terabyte is over $200, right? But that SSD is still slower than the one that comes with the PS5. So even if they come out with a faster SSD, it would probably cost even more. I don't even want to think about how much it would cost to have a PS5. It's going to cost a lot more than the $500 they're advertising. I'll tell you that. But at least on PC, you have options. You can use whatever SSD you want. You can even stick with a hard drive if you really want to do that. You aren't limited in that way, so you do save a lot of money in the long run because you have so many different options that accommodates so many different budgets. But with consoles, you have no choice. You have no freedom. It's what Sony and Microsoft tell you to do, you have to do. And that's how they take advantage of you. You know, you buy the console not knowing any better, but once you're already invested, it's kind of too late. It would definitely cost a lot more money at that point once you already have the console to switch over to PC if you spend $500 on a PS5. So you might as well pay for the extra storage. You might as well pay for PlayStation Plus or Xbox Live Gold because you already invested into the console. But I'm telling you, it's a really bad investment. I regretted buying the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. I should have gotten into PC gaming sooner because PC is the greatest gaming experience I ever had. I'm not just talking about graphics and performance because those things are nice, but just the freedom of choice that I have on PC, it saves me so much money and it makes me feel like I'm in control of my own experience. And that's something that I absolutely love. And I think that's something that all you people thinking about buying the PS5 and Series X, I highly recommend that you don't and you save up money for a gaming PC because even if the upfront costs are a little higher on PC because you are paying for the parts yourself, and on consoles, they do technically sell the consoles at a loss, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, you'll at least break even with all these hidden costs on consoles, right? So even if it costs a little, it's only going to cost a little bit more on PC than consoles. Like, PC gaming is not so much more expensive than consoles that people think because, like I said, all those hidden costs, paid online subscriptions that don't exist on PC, the unlimited options for storage that you do not have on console. And you could use whatever damn controller you want. Not to mention that on PC you have a much larger game library than on the Xbox, PlayStation, or Switch. It's just a better value. And you can actually use it as a PC. So even if it does cost a little bit more, you'll get so much more out of it than just playing video games. And that's something that people do not seem to understand. You can't do research on a console. You can't write your college report on a console. You can't edit videos on a console. Now, a PC is not just a gaming machine, but a console is just a gaming machine. It can play Netflix and all those other things, but PC can obviously do so much more than what a console can do because a console is a dedicated gaming machine. But a PC is whatever the hell you want it to be. So even if it costs a couple $100 more, because it really is a small difference in price, it's not a $500 difference, a $1,000 difference in price, because you are going to spend a lot more on that console than you think you are, and that's just to play video games. You could do so much more on a PC. So yeah, you guys should really consider getting into PC. For all my console guys that are really hyped about these new consoles, I really think you should reconsider and think more about getting into PC gaming because it offers so much more than consoles ever could, and it's not a huge scam because console gaming is a scam. That's what it is. So if you really care about saving money and getting the best experience you can with the money that you spend, you should stay away from consoles. Avoid consoles like the fucking plague because they really are not worth the money that you would spend over the years just to play video games. Get a PC instead. Trust me, you will not regret it, but you will regret buying a console because the value just isn't there. You're getting ripped off. Anyway, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.